You know how sometimes you notice patterns or like echoes in history, especially in culture?
Mm-hmm.
We've got this really interesting source today, excerpts from pasted text, and it draws some, well, pretty striking lines between the deaths of Tupac Shakur and King Von.
Yeah, it really does.
So our deep dive today is basically going to unpack those specific parallels that the text brings up and just see what's there, you know?
Right. And what immediately jumps out in this text is how it suggests this recurring pattern, almost like a template for these tragedies. It lays out some very specific similarities.
Okay, so let's dive in, starting with I guess, the core facts, the circumstances surrounding their deaths. The text points out both Tupac and King Von died from fatal shootings.
Yes, but it gets more specific than just that. The text notes both incidents were at nighttime, and crucially, both happen after some kind of altercation, some confrontation.
Okay, so not just out of the blue. There was a lead up, an argument then. The violence escalating quickly.
Exactly. That's the picture it paints for both cases. A confrontation and then the shooting happening in the immediate aftermath.
So it wasn't like random street violence, according to this source. It suggests a chain of events. Altercation leads to shooting.
Precisely. A temporal link is highlighted. The conflict, the period right after, and then the shooting itself. The text is saying, look, this sequence seems kind of similar in both situations.
And then the source goes deeper, right,
Yeah.
into the why. What reportedly sparked these confrontations, it mentions the whole rap beefs angle.
Hmm.
For Tupac, it explicitly brings up the famous rivalry with Biggie Smalls as the context.
Yeah, it cites that. And then, drawing a parallel, the text identifies King Von's conflict with NBA YoungBoy. That's presented as the underlying tension that reportedly led to his fatal altercation.
So established rivalries within the hip-hop scene are positioned as like key factors in both cases,
Yeah.
not just random fights.
That's the argument presented in the text, yes, that these weren't isolated incidents but tied into larger conflicts.
Okay, now here's a point the text flags as, I don't know, maybe particularly uncanny. It's about what happened after they died.
Ah, yes, the autopsy photos.
Exactly. The public leaking of their autopsy photos. The source highlights this as like another shared and pretty grim parallel.
That is a compelling point it makes. It shifts from the violence itself to the sort of public aftermath, how their deaths were treated, this intrusion into something incredibly private and tragic. It's quite jarring.
So you've got these overlaps stacking up, the fatal shootings happening at night, following altercations, reportedly linked to rap beefs, and then this shared detail about the leaked photos.
Right.
And the author of pasted text sort of ties it all together, concluding it points towards a, what's the phrase, cyclical nature of violence in hip-hop rivalries.
Yeah, that phrase eerily similar that the
Yeah.
text uses. It makes you pause, doesn't it? What makes these parallels feel so significant beyond, the tragic fact of violence itself?
It does push you towards that thought, doesn't it? This idea of history, kind of repeating. Does the source maybe imply there's something within I guess, the dynamics of the culture or the industry itself that might feed into these patterns?
Well, looking at the bigger picture presented, the text seems to be arguing exactly that, highlighting a potentially dangerous cycle where these rivalries escalate, from words maybe to real-world violence with terrible consequences.
Mhm.
And even the aftermath, like with the leaked photos, becomes part of that public narrative, another turn in the cycle, perhaps.
Of course, and it's crucial we remember these are real people, real tragedies. We're just examining the patterns that this specific text points out, not making light of the loss.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our focus here is just on analyzing the connections drawn in this pasted text source. We're not, taking sides or commenting on the conflicts themselves.
Gotcha. So just to wrap up the core points from the source, it highlights these key similarities, these echoes, between Tupac's and King Von's deaths.
Yeah.
Fatal shootings, nighttime altercations, the link to reported rap beefs, and then that shared detail of the leaked autopsy photos.
And the text interprets all this as potential evidence, maybe, of a recurring cycle. Violence linked to rivalries within that specific industry context.
It really leaves you with the question, I think. Does this pattern, the one identified in the text, actually offer any real insight into how things work, the dynamics within the hip-hop world today?
Mm.
And maybe the bigger question is, what role do we as listeners or the wider culture play in these cycles, if they exist? Something to think about